must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
Viewers and the comrades, the people, the Pan-African people of Africa, and mainly the people of Kenya. Elections in Africa create difficulties. Everywhere in Africa, you find conflicts emanating from elections. Results declared, the loser does not come out to concede. Elections, if not well managed, can trigger the worst crisis for any nation in Africa. It is therefore very prudent for the people of Kenya not to buy populist ideas and forget the hinge point of electoral reforms, electoral injustices, electoral systems, mechanisms that can change Kenya and bring a credible results of an election where the losers and the winner will agree this was a fair contest. Given that circumstances, the circumstances that surround our badly managed elections, Kenya faces this challenge. A referenda of reducing MPs to zero does not solve your problem, because that problem of Kenya is a structural challenge. It's a structural challenge in the sense that the structures themselves give access to more money stolen, to more money hidden, to more money misappropriated by various institutions. Therefore, to have credible electoral reforms, credible electoral systems, credible electoral mechanisms will solve 1/3 of the Kenya's problems, in that we shall have credible, proportionally elected people who represent all the views of the people of Kenya. That is my take. And that's the take of anybody who looks at the current situation, that any group that would come up and does not discuss the question of elections in Africa and in Kenya as a case study, and use it and look at how many dead bodies do we always collect when we mention the word elections. It is all over Africa. In Uganda, it is happening. In Zimbabwe, as we speak now, they are on the streets of Harare. It's because of elections. They want to come and overthrow and break down everything in Zimbabwe. It's elections. So elections in Africa create conflicts. But how can we stop violence before and after elections? Is through proportional representation of the model of South Africa, which has held elections, but there's peace on the streets of the cities. Thank you very much, viewers. Thank you very much, my people of Kenya. That's my message. I stand to be corrected, but I think it is only until you get a proportional representation system that will deliver every part of this country into your house of representation, into your elections, is when stability and tranquility will be permanent forever in this country. Thank you.
It is ridiculous and it is against the laws of nature that we can have somebody sitting pretty who takes home more money than the credible entrepreneur who is doing actual production of goods and services.
We always say it as it is.
It is only in this country that when a thief is arrested, you hear elders from their tribe saying, he is our son and he is our thief.
If you are
Yes.
deviant and I call you leader, probably you are already a leader, but you are leading in the wrong direction.
We want to see the role of the youth
Yeah.
in the security,
Yes.
governance,
Yes.
and development.
The youth that I meet and work with here, you know, we call them the millennials and X's and Y's, this and that. They don't necessarily want to live like their fathers and grandfathers, do business like their fathers and grandfathers. They're more independent, they're better educated, and they're the ones that are making everything move in this region.
We look at the issues, we talk about issues that impact people's lives in Africa.
The African peoples themselves continue to cheer bad leaders, and because they cheer them on, they continue to be misled.
Let me ask you, doctor, would you rather be somebody who does not enjoy so much freedom but you are rich?
Yes.
Or you'd rather be poor who you are actually imprisoned by the poverty itself?
My goal is not to come here and say, I want the majority ownership, I want to own this, I want to own that, I want to do this. My goal is we all make money and we're all happy, and I help build a big business here.
Punchline is for Africa, with Africa, from Africa.
Thank you very much. All over Africa, presidents are beginning to change constitutions. The constitutions that were made to give term limits seem to have no meaning to the current situation in Africa. Whenever we reach election time and the expiry of the tenure of office, presidents in Africa try to change their constitutions. The recent case of Guinea, where President Condé has tries to change the constitution to go for another third term or fourth term, has sparked violence that has left several people killed and some arrested, imprisoned. The question therefore is, why is Africa and why are African heads of state changing constitutions? What has made it difficult for presidents to retire and go back? There are few countries in Africa that adhere to the constitution, namely Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Kenya. These countries, Botswana, Namibia, Angola, some of these countries, when it comes to adhering to the principles of constitutionalism, they have never changed their minds. Are there conditions that make them fear? Where is the fear? What makes people change constitutions? What makes a head of state to involve the entire population in changing the entire constitution? The case of Burundi, where the constitution was changed, it sparked violence and even it reached a point of a military coup. Do we need these changes in the constitution at the last minute? Do we involve our people as to whether the type of governance we are taking is the best type of governance? These questions can be answered by my viewers. Many of you who are watching me today, and many of you who will have a chance to look at the clip. The bottom line and the questions are, do we need elections in Africa? Therefore, are we ready for competitive elections? Do we give it up? Do we say, thank you, my brother, for winning, or my sister for winning elections? How do we conduct ourselves pre- and post-elections results? When the results come out, do we accept them? Do we move on? Do we wait for the 5 years? Or do we change and go violent? I think that is the question that I leave to you people. in each of your countries, wherever you are.
A very good morning to you, and thank you for joining us. This is Diplomatic Leaks. My name is Miriam Ogutu, and our topic of today is: does Africa require the West to observe and monitor its elections? And we know that election observation is the observation of an election by an independent party in order to assess the conduct of that election on the basis of national legislation and international election standards. International election observation, which occurs only at the invitation of a national government, is defined by who carries it out. Typically, NGOs, such as the institutions that we've seen across the world, as well as institutions like the Commonwealth, communities, say in Africa, like SADC, COMESA, and so forth. And we'll see what the role they play, and are they really necessary when it comes to the elections that we've been having, especially here in Africa. To help me out in this conversation, I'm joined by Saxon Zwina from Zimbabwe. Saxon, good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm very fine, thank you, and nice to talk to you today. And I'm also joined by Xavier Savare, I guess, from Zimbabwe.
Good morning, how are you doing, Miriam? Thank you.
I'm very well, and nice to have you also on the show. And we're also joined by Javan Karanja from Kenya.
Good morning, Miriam. Good morning to our viewers, and good morning to our comrades from Zimbabwe. Thank you.
All right, very well. And we are also joined by Professor Jared Onyari as well from Kenya. Very well. As we wait for the professor to join there, we are also joined today by our guest panelist, Constantino Ngandu. Constantino, good morning. Constantino, good morning. Is it Ngandu? I thought I saw that name there on part of the panelists there. All right. So as we wait for that to happen, we've seen the elections happening in the continent, and a lot of times we've seen the observers giving a different verdict, that of perhaps an electoral commission in a body. And so we've seen sometimes, bringing a bit of a disagreement, or rather, we've seen the nature of elections here in the continent. So I'll just start by asking this question to our panelists this morning, Saxon. Does Africa require the West to observe and monitor its elections?
I think the issue of monitoring elections is to be respiratory. If we are to allow the West to monitor our elections, they have to allow us to monitor their elections as well, because they seem to be playing like a referee in our elections. But when it comes to their elections, we are not even invited at all, meaning we are being treated as inferior, maybe like these guys acting like our prefects in whatever we do. They consider themselves to be the alpha and omega in whatever we do. Mm-hmm. And I think we don't need them as long as they don't allow us to monitor their elections. That's my view.
All right, very well. Xavier, do we need the West to monitor our elections here in the continent? Xavier, maybe he did not hear me there, but perhaps Javan.
Yeah, thank you, Miriam, for that good question that cuts across the whole of African society. Yeah, and one thing that I will say, Miriam, from where we are, as a democratic as we are in Africa countries with our independence, there are some things that we are not doing right. And that is why we create that gaps that makes the foreign countries to come and monitor how we do our elections. And we need to improve on our institutions, Miriam, if we don't want that kind of input from outside our continent. Therefore, we need to have a great institution like the people who carry out the electioneering process to be credible teams, to be credible commissions that will give guaranteed as a trust and as credibility in our elections. That is the only way we will avoid this kind of interference. And also one thing that we need to do is to have citizens having their own mechanisms of voting without copying and pasting things from outside the country. We can have our systems. Not only we create our unique kind of a scenario, how we'll be having leaders into these positions. It can be after 5 years, 4 years, the way we agree, but not more of copying from the Western, because we copy from these other countries and we fail not to implement them because that is not our original thought. Therefore, on my conclusion, we don't need that kind of intervention from outside countries. But as it stands now, we Africans are the ones who have created a conducive environment for this kind of interventions.
All right, very well, Xavier. What do you say to that?
I say no. There are some points there that I agree with. We have to understand the concept of the European Union, the United States, or all the Western countries, whether they are coming through the EU or the Commonwealth, why they have got an interest in our elections. It is geopolitics at play. It is the idea of influencing how we do our own things. So I agree with the last panelist in terms of saying our biggest challenge and our biggest problem as Africans is we are trying to copy and paste a system of governance called democracy in exactly as it is done in the Western countries, not realizing that even in the Western countries, democracy is different. They do it the American way. Right now, yesterday, they were sitting at the Electoral College electing the president. Yet we know that, say, for example, in 2016, Hillary Clinton won the election on a popular vote, but lost the presidency on an Electoral College vote. That is a system that is skewed towards racism for years. What would I say if I was an African observer, for example, given an opportunity to observe the American election? That would be the first thing that I would pick on. This is an unfair system, the Electoral College system vote. You go to the United Kingdom, they have the first past the post. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether the population goes to vote or not. I think in 2015, we had David Cameron becoming prime minister on about 27% of registered voters, because the rest didn't bother to go. But because it is a democracy, he won the election. Yeah, or the type of democracy that they do first past the post. In fact, in Britain, you don't elect the prime minister, you elect the party. And the party would have nominated somebody to be a leader, that person becomes the prime minister. So when we are copying and pasting Western democracy, what exactly are we copying and pasting? Okay, like my other colleague, the panelist, said earlier on, we are being put in an environment where we end up having the Western countries perpetuating their colonialism over us through the systems that they have forced us to get into. There's absolutely no reason why, as Africans, we can take each other to account. Yes. As brethren, in our own African way, if we are mismanaging our economies, if we are mismanaging our politics, this is where we should take each other to account as brothers and sisters within our continent, without allowing outsiders who've got ulterior motives towards our economies, because it is not that they love us to have this democracy and stuff. Every time they've observed the countries, look at the last elections, 4 or 5 elections, how many of them have been approved by Commonwealth observers or the EU to say they've been brilliant, they've been fine? They will find something to complain about each and every time. So do we really need them, is your question? No, we don't. Why? Because we are capable of looking after ourselves and doing things on our own. We don't need to be authenticated by outsiders that we are human beings, that we are capable of managing our own affairs.
Why do we need their approval? Would be my question.
All
What
right.
for?
I'll come back to you. Oh, okay. All right. Complete your thought. Okay, so now, Professor, a couple of things there that our panelist there has brought up, and they're saying there's no reason why we cannot, take each other into account, why we cannot hold each other accountable here in the continent. And if you've been living in this continent and the number of things that have been happening, the killings that are happening in Nigeria, we've seen a lot of things happening in this continent, and a lot of times we have not been the best when it comes to being our brother's keeper. Instead, we face the other side and pretend that is not my problem. That has been the attitude that we've been seeing in the leadership in this continent. A lot of times leaders don't want to be involved, or seems as though they're interfering in another country or the internal affairs of another country. One, because they lack the moral authority. Maybe the ill that is happening in that country, they are also perpetuating the same in their own country. So on that, sometimes we are not able actually to come out and hold the other country into account. So when Xavier there says that there's no reason at all why we cannot hold each other's accountable. Is it really possible from what we've been seeing here in the continent? Professor.
Miriam, I've listened to the speakers before me, and they talk of an ideal situation and not a reality. And I want us to be very honest to ourselves. Suppose some of these African leaders, nobody even want to observe and see what happens. What do you think they will do? Let me just use a very, very recent case study of Tanzania. The international or the local journalists were not allowed to report. And if they were to report, a policeman was to stand and you report. No international observers were allowed to go and see what happens. Do you want to tell me that election, even if it was credible, you will say it is credible? The first question which you need to ask me before I answer your question, why do we need to observe? And what I'm trying to say that election observation is a valuable tool for improving quality of elections. I am only going to see were the polling stations open in good time, were people given the papers, were people only that. And what the observers do is to help build public confidence in the honest of electoral process. I heard my friend Safari saying that when Commonwealth come, they normally say that the election is fair. But remember, when they come, still the existing government, the regime, they choose which areas to take them. They cannot even take them to areas where they are in security, Miriam. So if observation, Miriam, is that can be supported, some of the things can be unadded, which don't go in a correct way. And I've heard them say that if we follow the rules, how will you follow the rules? Like now, the African Union, are they capable of monitoring, even condemning some of their leaders who want to perpetuate, who even when their time runs an office? Is there anyone who has got the audacity to tell the other one, no, guys, honor your constitutions? So, Miriam, to me, from where I stand, and I heard that there was a friend of mine who was trying to say that if the West are going to allow us go and monitor the election, then we can monitor. Life does not work like that. I can tell you for a fact, I saw the Kenyan members of parliament. They went to America to go and observe the elections. They do go. Observation is very key. It's one of the key fundamentals of democracy. That if you have got nothing to hide, then, in fact, even if they observe correctly, Miriam, and they don't take sides, they minimize conflicts, Miriam. They minimize they minimize the conflict. And Miriam, you know, elections are very emotive. Remember, even the one he has quoted the American recent presidential election, Miriam. You see some of the allegations Trump was trying to give. Oh, we were not allowed, we were not given capital. So observation in democracy is a key element. It is not only that it is the West, even we African brothers and sisters, we can be able to cross over to another country and go and see whether the elections are free. Miriam, I was once an observer. I got an opportunity by the African Union to go and see an elections in Algeria. So it is very key if only we play by the rules. And you know where democracy originated from, Miriam, the West. They have come far away from the democracy. And you can agree, as much as the West, they don't do their things correct. But the retrofit, Miriam, there is a better resemblance that they can be able to go for an elections, and then, Miriam, you can be able to announce the winner. Apart from Trump, who is becoming, who is coming from having a lot of racism mentality in his head. But you have seen the Americans, they can be able to call one another and congratulate. So to me, from where I say that observation is a very key thing, because, Miriam, it gives confidence even to the parties who are participating in that direction.
All right, very well. Professor, we know that Trump lives in his own alternative world there. So sometimes, even after the Electoral College yesterday endorsed again, President-elect Donald Trump, he's still, Joe Biden, he's still tweeting and he's still not agreeing. But I think the good thing with a place like America and the UK, as the rest of the panelists have quoted, they have strong institutions that guarantee a certain level of standards, regardless. We are joined by Dr. David Matsanga. Doctor, very good morning. Okay, so as we wait...
Miriam, let me just give you a rider. President Trump did not expect to lose. That is what you need to do. In fact, what Trump is trying to do is a clever way of admitting that he has been defeated through being rigged. But he did not expect Joe Biden would just defeat him. He was so sure. And that's why up to this point, he's living in denial. He's on denial.
Okay. He did not expect to win. So now he's you think it's a clever way, or it's just plain, I don't know. But we're joined by Doctor. Doctor, good morning.
Comrade Ngano needs unmuting Miriam. I don't know if you can do it on his behalf.
Okay.
Sorry to get it. Yeah.
It's okay. They will unmute him. So as we wait for the connections there, Saxon, what Xavier there earlier said, that there is no reason why we cannot hold each other accountable. We don't need people from outside to come in and hold us accountable here and tell us or see how elections are going and then give their verdict there. And I'll cite a few examples, like in Kenya and Zimbabwe, as we continue with the conversation. But when you look at the leadership and the governance structures we have in this continent, are we truly able to hold each other accountable? Saxon, from where you sit.
We are. We have the frameworks to do so. And I think if we don't need to look down upon ourselves, we need to just set up strong institutions that hold each other accountable for whatever we do. And I believe by observing our own elections, we have got our own measurements, our own barriers. No election is free and fair. I think the elections of 2020 in America have shown that there are all flaws in each and every election, but having strong institutions will help. And I mean, having someone trying to, because most of these observers have sown seeds of disunity at the end of the day, with some of the reports that they give, that some tend to be biased, which are particularly done. And I think in Africa, we can do these things on our own. We have been, how can we rely on the measurements from the former colonizers telling us what to do, how to elect our own leaders? And I think I give an example. they tie democracy and elections to good governance and development. I can give an example. We've got a one-party state nation, China. They adopted their own system. They're doing well. I mean, in terms of development, Africans, we need to have our own systems, and I mean, which we hold accountable to each other. And I think we can do it on our own. I believe so.
Mm-hmm. All right, very well. And we're joined by Constantino Ngandu. Constantino, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Very fine. Thank you so much for joining us today. So before I even go to Abigail, because I've seen she's also joined us, please attempt to answer this question. Do Africa require Western observers to come and monitor the elections here in the continent, or can we do it ourselves?
The notion of requiring the West to authenticate our elections is in itself completely unacceptable. It is unacceptable because it is a perpetuation of the notion that the West knows better and therefore should hold our hands and tell us what we are supposed to do.
But you don't think they know better because they brought us this democracy and we've never seemed to figure out how to work it if we were to go by their standards?
Democracy is governance by the people, for the people, of the people. Mm-hmm. We have always, in our own African traditions, been able to govern without reference to a foreigner. We have structured our cultural lives and our traditional forms of governance in a manner that involved everybody because we are a communal people. And we have always held each other accountable in our communities. That does not require white men to come and tell us what we're supposed to do. We have been able to do that before. The problem is we have for a long time allowed ourselves to be taught and educated by the white man so that we end up believing that what the white man says and his systems are what goes and our systems are inferior. Mm-hmm. This is a perpetuation of colonialism. Mm-hmm. And it is sad when we find very educated people believing that Africans can't hold each other to account. That for me tells us just how dangerous the education of the white man is to us. Mm-hmm. Because it teaches us to distrust ourselves and to despise our sense of judgment. We are capable to hold ourselves to account. We do not need outsiders to tell us what is good and what is wrong. Do we not know what is good? Do we not know what is right? Mm-hmm. But we do.
Constantino, others will argue that sometimes, a lot of times, even the African countries across this continent, they're not even able to take care of their, the budget when it comes to the elections, so they have to get funding from outside. So essentially, we are allowing these people to come because if I am funding you, then I feel like I have a stake to know what's really happening in that country, and that perhaps has really contributed for us to require, even whether we like it or not. Sometimes they'll have to come because they feel they have a say, because at the end of the day, they're taking care of our elections here, and perhaps that is a subject for another day. What do you say to that?
They are not necessarily coming to observe. They are coming to call the shots. Look at how many opposition parties in Africa are funded by by outsiders. Mm-hmm. It is a way for them to come in and still call the shots and determine what's supposed to happen. How many consider elections that have happened in Southern Africa, for instance, mm-hmm. where the former liberation parties are sitting governments, and how many opposition parties have been sponsored by the West to unseat those that led the liberation struggle. The same is happening in South Africa. It's happening in Zimbabwe. It happened in Zambia. It has happened in Angola. It's happened everywhere where we have former liberation parties in authority and in power today. The West is still seeking to unseat them through opposition parties that they fund. So when we say we require them to come. We are basically saying we are allowing them and need for them to keep interfering in our internal affairs through opposition parties. It needs to stop. And we need to allow ourselves to take control of our politics and determine our way without interference from the outsiders.
Very well.
When they're coming with their money, they are not only coming to help us, they are coming to take charge and to influence what happens on the ground. That's why we continue to even have problems in our country. Because there's too much interference from outsiders who think they know better for us.
All right, very well. And I'll come back to you, Constantino, there. Abigail Mpambi, good morning.
But Miriam, I'm so much interested. There's a question he has deliberately evaded to answer. Here is Africa. You are not capable. You are not even capable to do voter registration.
Hold on.
Let
the professor.
Education.
I want to come in.
Oh, all right. That is Dr. David Matanga. Doctor, good morning and nice to hear from you this morning. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you very much in Harare. Thank you very much in Nairobi. And thank you very much, Miriam, and the rest of you doing a great job. Thank you very much, Professor Onyari, and the rest of Abigail Saxon. I can see my friend, my new friend Ganda. I see you now. You have come. This is your platform. I can see. Look, I have very few words for all of you. Thank you very much. And I want to thank you with all dignity. Does Africa need elections? Do we know how to conduct elections? Do we accept defeat after elections? No. How many African leaders write 2 pages of letters and go with them when receiving results? Look at that perspective. I want you to tell me one leader in Africa who writes 2 speeches, a defeating speech and a winning speech. We don't have. Museveni has been writing winning speeches for 36 years. Look at the situation in Kampala right now. We don't have. 2, why do we have a country like DRC Congo with all the minerals? Then it turns around to beg for $2.8 million from European Union to hold an election. You are inviting enemies to come and see your meat. Then you want to eat the meat. After that, when they say, no, we have to eat something, you say, don't eat. But you invited them by calling them to subsidize your elections. Look at that. We are a problem to ourselves, Abigail. We are a problem to ourselves. We call these mercenaries. Some of them are homeless in their countries. We call them, when they reach Nairobi, when they reach Zimbabwe, average Zimbabweans sleep better than these mercenaries who masquerade as observers. So look at this situation. I just want to tell you, my people, we don't need observers. You show me one group that went to US to observe elections. Where are they?
Professor of Parliament.
Professor, you are the highest, you are one of the intellectuals. Have you ever been invited to observe US elections?
No.
They will not invite you. You might even not get a visa. In fact, if they know you are going to oversee the elections. Now, if elections has become a problem in the United States, what do you think Africa should have? We should look for new ways. I want to leave you with this. China, have you ever seen an MP from China? You people in Zimbabwe, in Harare, show me one member of parliament from China who comes to Harare International Airport to say, I am a member of parliament of the Communist Party. China has no MPs. But China gives us money. It approves money within it has one one day, 1 week to resolve all the problems of China and the world. They pick very good people to come to Beijing and resolve all the problems that you see. They give us railway, they give us road, they give us houses, they give us money, even money which we are spending today. So, the panel, Miriam, I just want to conclude by saying, I'm listening from the background. I want to conclude by saying, thank you very much. We shall continue discussing most of these topics next year in January at the beginning. And we shall be maybe in a better position to stand up and speak for Africa. We don't need these mercenaries. Yeah. Some of the mercenaries, we invite them ourselves. The opposition in Africa invites mercenaries. I want to make this known to the public. So many people have asked me why I am not talking about the Uganda elections. What is there elections in Uganda or a mess? Is there, Professor, you want me who has gone to school, who has more degrees than Museveni? Because Museveni has one flat degree, no honors. He got it from Dar es Salaam University, a simple degree. I go to an election which is horror, where people are being massacred. A scientific election in Africa. Where do you hold a scientific election without the scientific equipment? It is only people who went to wrong schools who can take part in such a charade. I can't. And that's why I called Dr. Besigye and told him, don't take part in this. Leave it to mess. And don't blame me. I did my part. I want to tell my Zimbabwean people, I have stood for Zimbabwe since 1998. And I will not tire to stand by you. Because we stood, because Mugabe agreed to be stood for. We stood because Mnangagwa introduced me to Mugabe. From there, I have never lost faith. But don't worry about Mafikizolos like Jonathan Moyo, Kasukwere, and the idiots. These are people who are idiots, who don't know what to do. We shall soon find out who is the master of all this trade. Some of us became rebels at the age of 17. Moyo doesn't know what rebel activities are. So whatever threats that is putting, this is a paper threat, but he doesn't even know that the paper he writes on is always taken away from him every night. So don't worry about that. The people of Zimbabwe forge on with a united Zimbabwe. Very soon, you will be up there. Your economy, I'm hearing so many feelers. Your construction, roads are being built. Keep it up. Keep it up. Don't allow these zygotes, mercenaries that they are coming to do what? To write a report which they have already written in Brussels, then they want to write for you. Abigail, don't accept. Saxon, don't accept. Don't. And all the rest of you, don't accept. Election monitors should also give us equivalent to scrutinize their elections in Europe. Our democracy is only 55 years old. The Kenyan democracy is 57 years old. You can't expect it to perform better than American democracy of 250 years old. Democracy evolves. Democracy does not come by coughing. Democracy does not come by Chamisa wearing his shoes and running around the world to clobber the MDC money, eating money in hotels with the women. Do you see this type of people should not be included in African history? is now finished. Look at Chamisa, cannot even, he has Chamisa part 1, part MDC, part 2, part 3, part 4. He's going to remain alone. Do you know that? That is the type of democracy that some of our African opposition leaders want. But for us, in Uganda, for example, you will see after 14th of January, our democracy might not be the same. Some of us who opted to be away from it, to stand aside, history will judge us rightly. For those who think I have not struggled for my country, look at the 36 years of my being in exile, what I have achieved. I brought back parties. I struggled on BBC, CNN. My voice is good work. The Google does not forget the voices. Everything is there. I've struggled. I brought the political parties. When the messages were wanting to kill me, they were hunting me all over the whole world to kill me. Now, if Museveni is also giving them a smaller dose, let them have the dose, because they did also the same. But because we have a common goal, Professor, I want to tell you, we shall have a common goal to liberate our people from that type of politics where violence, and the violence is used after elections, during elections, and any type of animal content in East Africa and the Great Lakes region who follows Museveni, we shall also deal with such malcontent. We are aware, we know them, and we are watching some of us. We are not just mouth tigers, we are operators. And time is going to come very soon, very soon, very soon. And I repeat, Karanja, very soon, that the people will know who is what we have done. Democracy, therefore, in Africa does not need supervisors. Democracy evolves. Try the Kenyan type of democracy. Shake hands. Look at Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta. They shook hands. We saved a lot of money. The country Kenya was going to burn. How much money have we saved? How much freedom have we? Karanja would not wear that shirt today and cross over to Kibra. His shirt will be taken. Professor's shirt will be taken off if he crossed to Nyeri. Yes, we had very bad politics here. But because of the new type of political dispensation, of unity of purpose, here we are. Thank you very much, Miriam. And that's all. I wish you a good Christmas. Abigail, the rest of you, don't worry. We shall be meeting shortly. We shall be meeting soon, and to chart a new way for Africa. Next year will be a new way for Africa. Keep up the program, keep up interacting, keep up making your points a sacrifice. Don't work for rewards. Most of us have never worked for rewards. You have seen the way I've conquered ICC. I have never asked for reward. There's no other expert in this sub-Saharan Africa who can tackle ICC, Abigail, than Matanga. Send me there, I will finish them. When they hear I'm on the flight to Amsterdam, they run out of the offices. Don't worry about that. Anybody, I saw a tape flying around talking about Mnangagwa. I am there already. Who is going? Where is it going to come from? Don't worry. I am here as long as I'm around. I will be able to defend, and I will defend. I told you ICC is fake. It will remain fake. It's a place of thieves. Those white guys are more thieves than even we black people. They came to Uganda. They caused us a problem. They investigated only the black Luo people, and they left the Bantu people. So what type of organization is that? That is my take for this year 2020. I have made my points. I want to thank all of you. I want to, don't give up. Miriam, pump in more, ask more questions. And my new friends in Zimbabwe who are coming on board, Abigail, tell them that the man is watching there. He's chasing Moyo. Don't worry, God bless you.
All right, that's Dr. David Matsanga. Doctor, very nice to hear from you. We've missed your voice here on the show, but we're looking forward after your rest. You will come back and you will join us after you're done with what you're taking care of. Thank you so much. That is Dr. David Matsanga. So I'll go to you, Abigail. Does Africa require the West to observe its elections in this day and age?
Thank you so very much, Miriam. Does the West require Africa to observe and monitor its elections? I am taking it back to you. I was listening. I think certain points have already been made, and I will start from probably interjecting on where Professor Onyari was saying, as long as we are able to observe the rules, then, well, we can achieve probably the democracy that he was talking about. But of course, whose rules are in the house? Because do we really own this democracy creature? And remember, democracy system came about by these very, very colonizers. They are even better positioned to know how to control, how to tame, how to do every tactic, even to an extent of blaming you whether you are right or not. We don't own this system. If I may take you back, remember, for example, here in Zimbabwe, the settlers arrived in the 1889. About a century or so ago. Are we saying we had no systems of governance that were actually running in our countries across Africa? So I really feel like we are missing the point somewhere, somehow. Yes, we may want part of this democracy definition that came about, but I think as Africans, we are failing also to domesticate the democracy package here home and say, is this the democracy that we want? That every five years we'll be chasing after each other. What time are we going to be having to focus on, in particular, nation building? At what point are we going to focus on finding each other as a nation and as a continent? If I look at this system of democracy, on paperwork, it's very workable. You would feel like everything is done and sure, here is a community where we are going to live happily. Democracy for the people, by the people. One of the panelists actually was describing that. But how practical can we implement such in Africa? Do we need this democracy package the way it is, or we are failing to package it home and domesticate it and say this is the kind of democracy that we are considering, that this is something that was brought. We don't have institutions that Saxon was talking about to say, do we have strong institutions to compete probably with the West? They are the founders of the very, very democracy thing. So I think we need to zero in and say, yeah, democracy, yes, but this kind of democracy, that's what we want as Africans. And of course, the West, they feel obliged to monitor the elections, and in particular their system. After all, is their system. How are you stopping them? Do you know their end game at the end of the day? So let's first of all own the electoral system and define the electoral system that we want as Africans. And believe me, you can't even go to America and impose your own system of governance on them. We used to have in Nigeria, we hear to them talking about the Igwe. We had the chiefs, the kings here down here in Zimbabwe, across Africa. We have actually made them a subordinate and a non-event in this system of democracy. And how do we expect ourselves to find each other trying to mix the two? This is exactly what has caused chaos across Africa. Right now here in Zimbabwe, we haven't started talking about nation building. From 2018, after the elections, what are we doing? We are trying to chase the American democracy. Okay. Everyone is running across, trying to chase and satisfy the American democracy. Chamisa is going left, I'm looking for the American democracy. Here, Mnangagwa is trying also to say, I want to show people that I'm good at the American
Very well. All right. Thank you, Abigail. We had a problem there with your signal, but once she's able to come back, she will come and conclude her thought. Thank you so much. So Oyet Patrick, one of our viewers here, is saying Africa should decolonize the mindset and start looking beyond the colonial boundaries to be free from external influence. And Bismarck Bura, you responded to him and you said, what about the personal greed of our leaders? We talk about Pan-Africanism, but when you look at it closely, it is just a means of exploitation of resources of unstable countries of the continent. Africans are the strangest human species existing in the planet. Okay, and coming from an African that is quite rich. And Ayol Verol, you're saying Africans have recolonized themselves. Africans believe so much in the West and more than they believe in their own and success. Ethel, you're saying Africa leaders are useless. Okay, that's very strong. And Patronila Lutango, you're saying, yes, very important, because Africa has lowered itself to that level of not wanting to do straightforward things and keep ourselves in bondage of being monitored. How many of our people go to Europe to monitor elections? We should ask ourselves where we have missed it on this planet. Xavier Savary, are you able to respond to some of those concerns or some of those comments by our viewers? Especially the last one, saying we
there was a thought. I was trying to bring
before Dr. Kamin. Go ahead, Professor. Go ahead.
One of the reasons why I say that, why do you want to go to Europe? Why do you want to go to Europe, to go to America to monitor their elections?
Why
do
not?
You finance them? Do you train their election observers?
Same reason they want to come and monitor ours.
No, I'm building a case. Yes. And so long as you don't do the recommendation I'm giving, we will only be talking about the idea. We are not being practical. Miriam, who finances African Union? The West. And Miriam, election is a process. Don't just wait until you talk about observation. Observation is at the tail end, Miriam. We start with registration, Miriam. The West gives us money to do registration of voters. It happens in Kenya. Miriam, they assist us in carrying civic education, because quite a number of the majority of my people in Kenya, they need civic education on how you go to what you need to do. Miriam, we go on a 14th day. Even that's
how they interfere. That's how they interfere. This whole civic thing, that's how they interfere.
Allow me build the case.
That is why FES are busy in Africa sponsoring democratization system, because that is how they influence.
If you are not able to do what I'm trying to say, how do you say they cannot observe? And Miriam, let me just have this to say. That we are living in a global world. We are proud of something that we have got minerals, we have got resources. That's what we call trade and development. We need each other to trade. We need some of these resources to be taken to the outside world. Miriam, then it comes on the counting day. The elections have been casted, they have been counted. Even transmission, Miriam, we need assistance. Miriam, then even during the announcement of the candidates, then if you have participated in an election, and Dr. Masanga put this case here, how many of the African leaders prepares 2 speeches, one for conceiving and one for accepting? None. So long as we African, we ourselves, we cannot finance our elections, we cannot observe by ourselves. Even when you talk about Africa, that we can do it in our own way, African Union is taken by hostage. So until Miriam, And I've heard people say, oh, during our chiefs, we used to do our democracy. Tell me even that kind of democracy, Miriam. It was a monarch. Don't say that the people, and even I've heard someone talking about China. The fact that the Chinese are not coming forward. See what the recent case, what happens in Hong Kong. The fact that the people are silenced does not mean they are enjoying that kind of democracy. My recommendation way forward, if we can be able to finance our elections, we can be able to keep these people from the West in our doorstores. But so long as we do activities, Miriam, which invite these people, Miriam, these people will continue to come to observe our elections. And I did start by introducing myself. Why do we have observation? Why do we need to observe the elections? Yes, we have done away from the West, and I am saying we should do. Are we capable to observe even domestic, even internally, the people of Zimbabwe, the people of Kenya? Are we able to move around all the polling stations in the country and observe that kind of election, Miriam?
And Professor, before
what do we want to achieve when we want to do this kind of observation, Miriam? We don't have the capacity, even the local ones. You cannot be able to move around your village and observe. So, Miriam, this is a conversation. This is a good topic. And I hope at the end of the day, we'll come the way forward to keep the West from coming to observe our election, Miriam.
Okay.
We need to do this.
All right.
Some of the African leaders, Miriam, in my own lifetime, I have seen a shortest queue in 1988 when we had queue voting system, Miriam. The shortest, Miriam, became the longest one.
Became the winner.
And we were seeing in broad daylight. So African, for us to define our democracy, we need to start learning to do the right things.
All right.
When you don't do the right things, Miriam,
yes,
nobody. Miriam, your neighbor is your neighbor. You don't know what happens with your neighbor. One day you will come and find that your neighbor has died simply because you were not being able to check on him.
All right.
So African.
Prof, before I'd like to
keep the West come from our doors. We invite them.
Prof, before I come to another person, I'd like to read something here for you. Maybe you can respond. Now, in 2007, we know what happened in this country. In the Kenyan's presidential election, brought this issue to the fore. Some of the issues that are being raised by the panelists here. Now, after international observers cautiously endorsed the poll, Kenya Supreme Court invalidated it on constitutional grounds, ruling that the election process was neither sufficiently transparent nor verifiable. Though the court did not allege that fraud had taken place, the verdict was highly embarrassing for the international observers and called for their credibility into doubt. So we saw them coming out and saying the Kenyan elections were free and fair and all of that. And then the Supreme Court of Kenya came and nullified those elections. So what do you say to that? Some of these observers, even as they come.
Miriam, I said that the sitting regime, when these people who are coming, Miriam, they are foreigners in a country, Miriam. The areas which these observers are taken, Miriam, they are taken around the cities where things are done properly. In the remote areas where, Miriam, the elections are being interfered with, where their security cannot be guaranteed, northern parts of Kenya, the Kabedo areas, Miriam, where we have got conflict, no observer will go there. Okay. So they will be taken around the cities, Miriam. They will see you have been issued with a voting paper. You have gone, you have casted your vote. They have been casted. That is how they were able to do. So in terms of observation, Miriam, we could be able to put both internal and internal observers. But what the governments do, Miriam, they dictate which areas some of these international observers, they will go. Okay. And in those areas, for sure, they don't interfere.
Okay. All right. Very well. So now, before I have you, Constantino, coming in, because I've seen you want to respond to something. Then in 2011, the then British ambassador to Zimbabwe sought clarity on whether Western observers would be allowed into the country. Mugabe, the then president, answered explicitly in the negative, and he said Zimbabwe cannot invite people who have imposed sanctions on her to be observers, because by imposing sanctions, Britain has demonstrated her dislike of one side while favoring the other. And since then, Zimbabwe has remained remained under sanctions from Britain, the European Union, and the United States, and most international election observers are commonly drawn from these countries and generally deployed in the regions to help what they think is safeguarding the integrity of the electoral process here. Now, in October this year, 2020, President Mnangagwa, Sentiment Trans, said something that was quite similar to what former, now late President Mugabe there said when complimenting Malawi on the elections. Mnangagwa stated, "Here is a country which has held elections without the United Nations, without SADC, and almost all of these civil society organizations observing the elections, but they were successful, peaceful elections conducted by Malawi on its own. This makes us think whether it is still necessary in future for SADC countries to look for supervisors from across oceans there." Constantino, how do you respond to that?
I start by saying His Excellency, late President Robert Mugabe, was right. If an enemy comes into your house and says you're supposed to do this, and you know very well that he has been hurting you and hurting your family, there's no point in allowing them to participate and be involved in what you're doing. So he was right to keep them out. And so we must continue to keep them out until they respect that we are an independent people, that we are a sovereign nation, that we have the right to determine our own future without being told by our former colonial masters what to do. These people want to continue to perpetuate their influence and their power and to peril their interests in our own backyard. They don't come, like I said earlier, to take care of us. They're not interested in us. They're interested in what we've got. They're interested in their own agenda. The people that they send as observers and monitors are members of their intelligence. They're busy gathering intelligence for their sake in order for them to push their agenda. So we need to wake up. And this whole business of saying, oh, these people are nice, they give us this money because we can't afford it ourselves, that's nonsense. We can afford to pay for our own elections. The problem is we have depended on it for far too long. And until we are able to have pride in taking care of things on our own and do things ourselves, we will continue to have interference from the outside.
What I hear you saying is that we can be able to take care of our elections, but that has not been the case. Why do you think that is so?
Because there has been a continued interest in others coming in and paying. I mean, who wants to pay when somebody else is interested in paying for it?
So is that a leadership problem that we're having? Is that a leadership problem that we're having in the continent? All right. Okay, very well.
Yes,
Savare.
Yes and no.
Okay, Xavier.
I mean, quite often, I mean, as you know, Miriam, sometimes I disagree with Professor Onyari quite profoundly, and there are times that I agree with him. I'm just trying to unpick on something that he said earlier on, and I think we did make.
Okay. We're having a bit of a sound problem there. Your signal is not very good today, Xavier, but when you're able to come back to us, you will. Jevan, yes.
Miriam, as you are proceeding, I want the panelists to assist me. Do we need to observe the elections? Is there need? And if there is need, who is to observe?
Well,
an election be manipulated? And if election can be manipulated and fraud can be found, who can be able to detect and tell us this has happened?
Okay. And all right.
Miriam,
and I'm sure.
Let me have this to say.
Okay, go ahead.
And I have listened quite profoundly on what a professor is saying.
Profoundly,
but
is the word of the day.
Professor should also measure on the. Apart from this issue of having interference, and this was I'm making a case on my first ambition, we should have our own creation. We should create our own systems, not copy-pasting this system and trying to be and bringing these foreigners to implement them in our countries. That is where we are getting it wrong. We had our system then, Miriam, where when you come to a region where I am, we used to have a system of governance before colonialism, and that is the route that we need to take, even if it means having the kind of kings in our systems. Then let it be okay. Let it be that.
But is that
at
practical,
the end of the day,
Karanja?
let's structure a system that is unique.
That is beautiful and nicely said. But where we are in the 21st century, is it possible to go back there and reboot again? Is it practical?
What I'm saying is this: let's have our own unique systems so that we avoid this copy pasting. And Miriam, the point where we get these external people coming to observe our elections is because we go by their standards. If we change the standards, they will not come to observe what they don't know. They come to observe because they are privy to what is happening. That is the case because we have copied a system that looks similar to what they have in their countries. And therefore, we need to create a system of governance and elections that will ensure that we have. Miriam, we can also use other methods to get to these people into position, not only through this kind of voting. We can extend the terms or limit them and have a few individuals in these positions. And that is how it will create a diversity and we have our unique system. Also, Miriam, we can have observers within our continent. Not only necessarily do we need them from foreign. We can have our, like in Malawi, they had observers from this country so that they read the positive thing and they sell it to other countries in Africa so that they can emulate those kind of successes. And on the issue of Africans going to observe our elections, the issue here from my side is the point why Americans and other European nations don't invite Africans as observers is because we are not. That is not our system, and we cannot take our problems there. That is why I say we have created the gaps. That is why these people come to observe our elections. Unless we change and we rectify these gaps, that is only time this continent will be saved. And I agree with one of our observers. We have leaders, and I will not call them useless as he said, but we have leaders that not reflect the will of the people, but they are there to enrich themselves.
But
when we change on leadership and we have our own system and we seal the gaps and the loopholes, these external people will not come to interfere with our processes here.
Jeven, we elect these leaders, so we just as we elect these leaders. Because that is
we elect them, but we can empower the electorates by getting them the right information, and we avoid voting in the name of just voting, but we look for men and women of integrity on that process. The power in the ballot, and that is why you find in our country the leaders are prone to divide Kenyans along community and ethnic basis, because if they don't do that, Kenyans will open their eyes and Africans will start electing good leaders that will prosper and take this country forward.
But Jeven, I'm confused now because you're saying we should go back and see how we used to do things, but at the same time, the power of the ballot. The ballot came with the Western way of democracy, so that is a bit confusing. But I'll come back to you just a bit later, Xavier.
We can modify the ballots.
Modify the ballots, like what Ruto is saying, the multiple choices. Come on. Xavier, there's something you wanted to say, but before you come in, President Mnangagwa here is saying, you know what, Malawi did a good job. SADC was there and was the key observer there, and the elections went on fantastic. But also we know what had been happening in Malawi. They had elections last year in June. It was nullified in the 3rd of February earlier this year, and so they had to go to another election there where President Peter Mutharika was defeated. But we saw what happened in Tanzania just a couple of weeks ago when Tanzania went to its elections and all safeguards of democracy were thrown out of the window, and SADC was there, and SADC really didn't do much. So I'm not sure, Xavier. What is your take on that?
Okay, I mean, the problem is you're trying me to you're trying to ask me to comment on quite specific
on us
issues.
being our own observers. So I'm just citing SADC as an example.
Yeah, I will try to comment, but this is one other thing that I often avoid because they are always internal issues on the ground, information that sometimes we are not privy to, just observing from where I'm sitting right now in Zimbabwe. And we then just throw these comments and not actually understanding what happens. And it also happens with our own observers. The biggest problem that we have, is, I think I said this before, when we got our political independence across Africa, most of the parties that went on to lead those countries were also, by and large, creations of the Western countries. If they weren't, at some stage, they were captured to advance Western interests. And until we begin to have an honest discussion within the continent as Africans about where we have come from, where we are, and where we want to go. As much as Professor Anyari says, this is the reality. Yes, this is the reality where we are. But reality is created from an ideal. Okay? You decide this is what we want to be. This is an ideal situation. This is what we want to be. Let's work towards that and then create a reality for that. Now, I think last time I made reference to the United States interest in Zimbabwe during the Rhodesia War with Henry Kissinger, and how by the time we got to Lancaster House, ZANU-PF as a party, that is the Patriotic Front, ZIPRA forces and ZANLA forces, the nationalists in ZANLA, in ZANU, and the nationalists in ZAP, most of them were now dining and wining with Western intelligence officers. Yeah. To the point that even when we got independence, we were now being dominated by the likes of Tiny Rowland in our economy, Anglo-American, and everyone else. So, and Britain ensured that it safeguarded its interests by even telling us that we can't take land. We spent 15 years having our mothers, fathers, children, women and girls being raped and massacred by the Rhodesians for land. But what do we do when we get to the Lancaster House? We park the issue of land to satisfy the colonialists. You see, that is where I'm saying, when we start these things, it depends how far we want to go with discussing them objectively, truthfully, and honestly, and then proffer solutions from that informed positions. Right now, we've got a problem. One of the problems is what Professor Onyari has said. And I asked this question before a couple of months ago. Why is it the African Union, SADC, ECOWAS, all these African institutions, including our African Development Bank, we can't fund ourselves? 54 countries, rich in minerals, in everything, in people who call themselves intelligent and educated and stuff, but we can't fund our institutions. Yet we've got foreigners that are coming from far abroad to literally pick money in our countries because there is loads of it in terms of resources, in terms of various opportunities. Yet we fail to find things, to fund things that strengthen us in the manner of our governance, that strengthen our economies. And these are the questions that we have to ask ourselves. Now, if we are going to be honest and real here is, we've got selfish leaders. We've got a lot of corrupt leaders, okay? That is, and they've got no interest in building institutions that last long. I did say this before. The problem with Africa, even when you look at trade negotiations, trade deals that are made with the European Union or with the Chinese and stuff, they are negotiated by politicians who live on a 5-year life cycle. All they are looking at is how they benefit for the 5 years before they are either kicked out or before they rig the next election or before they win the next election, whatever happens at the end of the 5-year term. And there is a problem because that is why we don't have long-term infrastructure programs. I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, I was, again, as I usually do, involved in a Chatham House discussion where James Dadridge, who's the Minister for Africa, was discussing basically the United Kingdom's plan for Africa post-Brexit. Okay? They have a plan for Africa post-Brexit. We don't have a plan for Britain post-Brexit. And this is how I know that we don't have a plan. We had the ambassador of Uganda there, the ambassador of Morocco, and there was someone from Kenya. And they asked a question to James Dadrich to say, so what are you going to do for the girl child in Africa? Because the girl child is dropping out of school due to pregnancy and stuff. Now, these are our ambassadors.
Wow.
And the ladies were female. I mean, obviously, they are ladies, they're female. But they have the audacity to ask James Dadrich, a white man in the United Kingdom, how we should look after our girl child here in Africa, how we should look after our daughters here in Africa, and how we should fund the looking after the education of our daughters here in Africa. You can see where the problem is. And James was very, generous in his offer. He basically said, yes, we actually believe that Africa is best led by women than men because it's easier to work with women than it is to work with men. That's James, his own words. You can look for this on the Chatham House website if you on. And the next step he goes, he says, actually, we got contraception in 12-year-olds. And I know this has been happening here in Zimbabwe. The debate has been going on for the last 3, 4, 5 months about giving 12-year-olds contraception. We never ask the impact it will have on our 12-year-old daughters 10, 15 years from now. We never ask whether there are other solutions we can. In fact, we shouldn't be asking for help from Europeans about these issues. These are issues that affect us, that we should be able to fund. But because Britain is going to fund the education of our girl child, the education of everyone, they call the shot, including telling us to give our kids contraception, which we don't know how it is going to affect them in the long term. So the issue of funding is at the center, at the core of most of these things. Until and unless we decide to start funding ourselves as Africa, we will always have diplomats who are funded by brown envelopes through the European Union, it's shameful, to say 80% of the budget of African Union is funded by Turkey, is funded by the European Union. When they start taking the shots, why do we cry?
All right, very well.
So yes, the issue of election observers and the issue of yes, we have seen that it happens. We can have successful elections. It depends just by whose standard. Okay. Like you said in Malawi, everyone commented afterwards to say, brilliant, Malawi has done well and stuff. And then the Supreme Court in Malawi went on to overturn that. The only satisfying thing for me there is
that was in Kenya, Xavier. That was in Kenya in 2017. And actually, when the Supreme Court in Malawi were making their ruling, they mentioned Kenya there. They based their ruling on what happened in Kenya in 2017 to nullify the elections there of Peter Mutharika. And I'll come back to you because
the key point, the key point for me is an institution within an African country, an institution being brave enough, standing on principle and nullifying an election and having it rerun. I like that idea. I'm happy with that. I can take that.
All right.
Rather than having these observers who,
So I think if we had stronger institutions in this continent, that will solve half of our problems. Now, of course, we saw the elections that happened in Ghana a couple of days ago, and now Ghana's opposition leader and former President John Mahama cited alleged irregularities and accusing President Akufo-Addo of harnessing the military in an attempt to sway the outcome. Election observers, however, stated that the polling was generally free and fair, and a representative from Ghana's independent and non-partisan coalition of domestic election observers stated that the results declared by the Electoral Commission reflected how Ghanaians voted in the presidential elections. And another country that is gearing up towards its election and tensions are building ahead of presidential and legislative elections elections this month in the Central African Republic amid friction between rival candidates and increasing violence by armed groups that still control much of the country despite a peace agreement signed almost 2 years ago. Now, among the candidates who have applied to stand for president in the 27th December elections is former leader Francois Bozize, who returned to the Central African Republic in late 2019. I think in Central African Republic, they'll not only send election observers, but they also send ICC observers there because, you know, it has been trailing former, Francois Bozize there. But let's just put that aside. And I think we're joined by motion. Professor, you're laughing. They'll send ICC there, observers there, so that anybody, because chaos it will likely happen there because of what has been happening there in Central African Republic between the Salaka and all that and the different factions that are fighting there in the Central African Republic. So it is a prime candidate for International Criminal Court, the elections there, and they will produce a person that might go there. I don't know, but I'm sure they'll send an observer there. We are joined by Motion Mutemai. Motion, good afternoon.
William, don't you think the presence of ICC is intimidating the African people, even when the election will be rigged, that they keep quiet?
Okay.
That is how low we have stooped. But I'm happy with the way the conversation is going because, Miriam, the question here is, do we need Western observers in our election? The answer is no.
All right. Okay.
But what we need to do, we fund our elections, which we are capable of doing. We have got Africa, we have got regional bodies, SADC, East African Union, ECOWAS, Maghreb. We can't be able to observe ourselves. But Miriam, the disaster is, and I've read with Safari, he said that he always disagree with me. We are on the same page.
All right.
Because
you just
allow someone to finance your election, do all other things. How will you stop him at the far end to come and see the work he has invested in?
If I brought you,
African, we are capable, and there's this point I'm trying to say that African, we are capable of doing our own things. Miriam, in Africa, we have got tribal we have got tribes and communities. The way the Abagusi people, where I come from, is not the way the Luo people or the Kikuyu people or the Shona people used to do. So, Miriam, there are some things which we need to brand. And for instance, Miriam, let me just have this to say. In 2002, general election, Miriam, we had credible elections and everybody in the world was coming to say, how did you do it? So it is possible, Miriam, that we can have elections, Miriam, if we mean to do it. If we eliminate corruption,
the goodwill,
and if we want to take Africa forward. They are talking about Malawi. The party which was in power is not the one which just won. It is opposition. So these things are doable, are achievable, and we can be able to keep the West if we play by the rules.
All right, very well. Abigail Mupambi, are you still there?
You can give to Ngandu, is there?
I thought Motion joined us. Motion Mutemai. I don't know, Motion, are you there? Good. It's afternoon here. It's about 12:30, midday here in Nairobi. All right, Motion is not there. So I just want to get our final thoughts, and I'll start with Saxon Zvina.
Okay, sorry.
Do we need, do we require the West to observe our elections? And we've all agreed no. So now which way forward? How can we ensure that we have credible elections in this continent? Or how can we avoid the need of the Western observers to come to Africa?
We just need to empower ourselves, build institutions that can observe and promote African governance system. I think that's the only way to go.
Jevon? Okay, very well.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you very much, Miriam. And let me make my final submission by saying that we only solution that we need to have in Africans is empowering our systems, empowering our institutions, and having a culture of cultivating to have our own systems of governance, and that without copy-pasting. I'm not saying that copy-pasting is bad, but we should take what works for us and what will not put us in a situation whereby we'll have the intervention colonizers to come and intervene on our processes. And we should also ensure that we have, and when we have that kind of institutions, credible electioneering bodies in our systems, then we should work of ensuring that we have electorate will be able to make wiser decision on the ballot. Because as it stands now, Miriam, we might not go back to our own kingdomship systems or chief assistants, but we should improve on the democracy that we have, that we borrowed from the United States, and we make it better, and we include some of the African perspective on leadership, and that is the only way we'll have a great and prosperous kind of a continent. And after having great electorate, then we should work of having leaders of integrity and honesty at the helm of our positions. Thank you.
And at this point, can you agree that it's impossible or almost impossible to go back to the chiefdoms? I never grew up in the chiefdoms. I know democracy. So if you were to take me back to 17th century there, I don't know if I'll cope, but anyway, Constantino, what's your final thoughts?
I think we need to believe in ourselves and stop believing a lie. We have listened to the West for far too long, and they have always told us we cannot. We need to change the way we think and view ourselves. We can. We can run effective governments. We can run effective administrations. We can run transparent elections, and we can do it. We need to believe ourselves and begin to resource those things so that we are able to do it and hold each other to account in the region, on our continent. We can hold each other to account, and we can strengthen the regional institutions to make sure that we are accountable. So we need to believe ourselves and begin to act accordingly.
All right, a vote of confidence there for the continent. Constantino is saying we can do it. We have the capabilities. I think we only need goodwill and better institutions that will come from, I think, goodwill as well. So thank you so much, Xavier Savary. Your final thoughts.
I think we need to understand that the world, particularly the Western world, owes us nothing. Okay. The issue of globalization, which Professor Onyari said, hang on a minute. The issue of globalization, which Professor Onyari said earlier on, if there is one thing that Africans, we should always be careful about, is these things that are manufactured from Western capitals and then sold to us. There is the issue of globalization is just a nonsense notion. Okay, right now you will struggle to have a visa to get into any Western country, or Britain or United States. Is still being denied. Yet the Europeans can just decide within an hour, can I catch a flight to South Africa, and they will be in South Africa. You will not have the same equal rights, equal access because of globalization and saying, oh, the world is now a global village. No, it is a way of manipulating us Africans, making us believe a mirage so that they can exploit us. So what should we do as Africans? We should learn, number one, to respect ourselves. And when we decide to respect ourselves, we also have to ask ourselves, what exactly do we stand for? What exactly do we want for our continent? This is what we want for our continent. How do we fund all these things that we want for our continent, for ourselves? And when we think about those things, we also have to ask ourselves, each and everyone who aspires to be in politics should ask themselves a question. Why am I getting into politics? Do I have the necessary integrity to participate? Because my decisions are going to affect millions of people in the country, whichever country I belong in. The problem that we have is we have a lot of politicians in Africa, sadly so, that lack integrity and honesty and selflessness. They speak about it. They talk about it because we are very good at talking as Africans, while we act to the contrary. We talk about having strong institutions. A lot of countries in Africa, particularly Southern Africa, which I'm a bit more familiar with, they've got a lot of good institutions that are just undermined by politicians. So you have little Chamisa going to the Supreme Court and the Constitutional Court, because that's the institution that will decide how elections go. But what, because of his lack of integrity and honestness and because of his selfishness, he decides not to accept the apex court's decision. So why go there in the first place? You are undermining your own institution because some stupid ambassador from America has given you 100,000. So unless we begin to behave with integrity and saying no to corruption, not corruption just within our country, but corruption that is brought from Western countries that make us sell out or be traitors of our own heritage and inheritance, we've got a serious problem.
Okay.
We need to ask ourselves strong questions about who we are, where we want, how we want our countries to be and our lives to be and our next generations to be. This thing of living for the now and the here is just a nonsense for us Africans, and we must stop it.
All right, very well. Okay, all right. So a lot of times you see even you speaking from the South African parts of perspective, but even in East Africa, a lot of times people have a problem in rather confidence in institutions like our courts. So maybe, I don't know, it's because there's been a lot of politicking and politicizing these institutions, and so there seems to be leaning towards or seem to be biased towards or for, and so that really has been a problem.
Okay, let me have a quick comeback on that, because these institutions, okay, we set them up for us. They may have a problem, but when they have a problem, we should not seek to undermine them.
Okay.
You will find, you travel the length and breadth of Europe and America, the judges that are in the Supreme Court in America right now are put in by politicians. There's not a single institution that has got people who are not appointed by politicians. But at the end of the day, you come to a point where you have to respect it and not undermine it. That is how you keep the integrity. Even when you are not in agreement like Trump is, you still recognize what that Supreme Court says.
Oh no, Trump does not recognize. Let me just remind us.
He doesn't, but
but the institutions there are strong, so it does not matter whether he recognizes it or not. It will not change the decision there. All right, very well. Trump. About 36 days to go, but anyway, not our problem there. But, Abigail, family. I've been counting, She's not there. Professor, end it for us.
I know you don't like Trump at all.
Not I don't like him. I'm just saying America's decided. I mean, we're talking about strong institutions. Oh, you're there. Your final comments.
Yeah. Thank you so very much.
Yes.
All I can say, I think we need to build confidence within ourselves. Sometimes we are actually pressured by certain conditions even to realize how strong we are. I'll give the case of Zimbabwe currently. Because of the illegal sanctions, Zimbabwe is failing to access various lines of credit outside the country in all these financial institutions. But guess what? While we have got all those problems, for the first time we are managing to construct our own roads, something that is, we'll talk about the Beit Bridge, Chirundi, a road that cuts across looking from within. So there are a lot of things that we are beginning to realize that we can even do while we are under pressure. But I think the moment we begin to realize how evil such systems, external systems are in our governance, I think the earlier the better we recognize and identify our strengths and begin to build from within and do something. And of course, the West, remember, they are interested parties. I don't think someone is competing with you and wants to become the referee again. I don't think it works. We don't need the West in particular. We need, of course, people who are viewed and who are seen to be neutral. There are interested parties in Africa. They've got their own interests. I think we just need to build our own self-confidence and begin to do the right thing. And of course, the right thing has to be done. And as I part, I wish all of you a Merry Christmas. And I believe this is the last program in 2020 and a prosperous, happy 2021. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And on behalf of everybody else, thank you so much, Abigail, and I wish you a very Merry Christmas too. And before we get to that, Professor, conclude for us.
Miriam, let me just have this to say, that we are a group of citizens. And if you think I'm lying, look at COVID-19. it was one case from one.
1 year now. Starting
One case, which was detected in December. With December 19, I don't know.
2019,
See
yes.
the kind of havoc it has done to the world. The West, whom we keep on talking about and castigating, are they investors in the continent of Africa? Yes. Do we trade with them? Yes. Miriam, where you put your money, don't you think you are so much interested to see what kind of government in that place comes in that place?
That's where your mouth is.
Only a fool. Let me not just use that. Only a fool will just want to you invest your money, and you are not interested to know the outcome of the political leadership. I have liked that because politics determines our way of life, the way we do things. Miriam, I will only answer the question: do we need the West to come and monitor our elections? If what I am going to say is the affirmative, then it is yes. Then Miriam, in every generation, there are men and women who God looks from above and is so much proud of them. Still, there are some of the observers from the West, Miriam, who mean well for the continent of Africa. Can their observation, Miriam, lead to the correction of errors or weak practices which can be detected in our elections? Can they be able to help us deter manipulations and fraud in elections? Can they be able to expose them as they occur? Can they issue positive reports about our election which has been carried, Miriam? Can they be used to build trust in the democratic process? Miriam, can their observation be able to enhance and legitimize the government which has emerged? Miriam, will the election observation, both domestic and international groups, encourage civic involvement in the political processes? If the answers to the question that I have posed is to the affirmative, Miriam, then we need them. If it is to the contrary, Miriam, we don't really need them. But I have said, Miriam, the West, we trade with them, we do business with them, they are investors with them, we encourage them to come and invest in the continent of Africa. How do you think, Miriam, they can just leave them that you can do politics on your own? They have got direct interest, Miriam, to ensure that the right leadership comes in so that they can be able to protect their interests, just like anybody else. I submit, Miriam.
All right, very well. Professor Jared Onyari, thank you so much for your time. Saxons Vina, thank you so much. Jevan Karanja from Kenya, thank you. Xavier Savare, thank you so much. Constantino Ngandu, was lovely to have you on the show today. Hopefully we can have you again next time. And Abigail Mupambi, thank you so much. And of course, a special thank you to Dr. David Matanga, who took some time to join us on the show today. And somebody here said I don't like Trump. I have no problem with Trump. But I like people who live in the reality, who don't live in a bubble, and who don't have alternative facts. I prefer that. Thank you so much. This has been Diplomatic
It was
Clips.
just me. It was just me winding you up, Miriam. I know.
I like people who work with the facts that all of us, the standard facts, not alternative facts. I prefer that. All right. This has been Diplomatic Clips. My name is Miriam Mugutu.
Miriam.
Thank you for watching, and bye-bye for now.
Thank you.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.